I'm delighted to welcome today a very special guest, Ryon Anderson, who is a business performance and peak performance coach. So welcome, Ryon.
Thank you. I'm very happy and excited to be here.
Marvelous. So your accent is sounds American. Where are you from? Where are you at the moment?
Yeah, so in the moment I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. I've been here for about 18 months. I was in Austin, Texas about 10 years before that. And I'm originally from a very outside of a very small town called Dublin, Texas. Grew up on a dairy out middle of nowhere, Cleachy roads, horses, cows, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm sure my accent's quite strong over in your area.
Yes, yeah. Well, although I'm from the UK, I'm actually in the Algarve in Portugal. So
Okay.
it's truly global now. We've got this Zoom and all these other tech things that we can use.
Oh,
It's quite
yeah,
fascinating.
it is. It's a lot of fun.
So business performance and peak performance coach, what's the
Mhm.
difference between those two, Ryon?
To me, it is whether or not you focus on like the business side versus the individual, right? And because what is required for business performance, although somewhat similar, is very different because it's very team approached. It has a lot of different goal strategies, working parts. Whereas the individual, the big performer side, it's individually, focused as well, and the variables that you mess with are a little bit different, although both of them, in my opinion, which is why I focus on both of them, business involves people at the foundation of business. It is, done for the people by people. And so, the whole mindset aspect of it, that part of it is what I really enjoy working with, whether it's my, CEOs, founders, or whether it's my professional athletes.
Okay, professional athletes.
Mhm.
That's a different ball game altogether, isn't it? In terms of peak
It
performance,
is.
like you say, it's
Mhm.
individuals, and then you've got the business side of things. I hadn't thought of it like that before. That's a really straightforward separation, isn't it?
It is, and but yet, in many ways, it's similar, right? Like the stresses of like performing at a really high level under really really difficult circumstances. Although the time horizon might be a little bit different for business than the immediacy of a sport, the circumstances are very similar. And actually, I kind of picked what I did based on personality types. In many ways, the personality types are very similar too, right? Very driven, competitive, always looking for the edge, right? And so that really is kind of why I picked those two areas. Frankly, I picked them because in many ways they're a reflection of who I am, and I kind of wanted to work with people I like myself, and I kind of work with people I wanted to work with people that I enjoyed. So that's kind of where it led me with those two kind of categories of clients.
Cool. Okay. So how would you describe your personality type then?
Yeah, so if you look at the whole standard Myers Briggs, I'm an ENTJ. I'm super competitive. Like I said, I like looking for that edge. But I'm also like I view life and business as a game because for me it kind of like games can be won and it kind of removes a little bit of the pressure, not the pressure, but the seriousness of it a little bit because I'm a huge believer in having fun with everything you do. And you're supposed to have fun when you play a game. I mean, the game may be serious and the results may be serious, but it doesn't mean you can't have a ball while you do it. So that's kind of how I view both of those. Just because it, it keeps that element of play, it keeps that element of excitement, and it keeps that element of you know you're going to have setbacks, but yet I can manipulate these three things to come up with a solution, right? And so for me, that's kind of why I view it that way.
Cool. The Myers-Briggs type, I never
Hmm.
got the hang of Myers-Briggs because to me it was way too complicated. I use the disc
Yeah,
model, and I think that's
yeah,
maybe
I know. I've seen that in your profile.
yeah how we connected on LinkedIn, maybe with conversations about profiling and so on.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think if I was assessed on that, I think I would be that as well. That comes off quite a lot with people that I talk to. I'm a D and an I on the disc style,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
which I think is
yeah.
very similar to your style. No messing about, but lots of energy, competitive, and needing fun as well, you know, the same time.
Yep, yep.
So
It's funny because when you look at what it says, it calls me the field marshal. It's kind of like the
okay,
person who like leads off into battle, like follow me, we're gonna go do this. But you think about
yeah,
what an entrepreneur, what's an entrepreneur doing? Going
yeah,
off into something dangerous, going follow me, we're gonna do something cool and exciting. You
yeah,
know, so
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So you mentioned about being super competitive. Have you competed in anything? Have you done any individual sports and stuff?
You I did. I wrestled in junior high and I powerlifted all throughout high school. But that's because I lost my vision at 11. My goal in life was to be an NFL quarterback. So like I grew up playing baseball, basketball. I didn't get to play organized football, but I was the kid, at 8, 9, 10 years old, throwing a football at a tire swing in my backyard, running drills because I had read like that's what my idol was Joe Montana. That's what my idol had done as a kid, right? So I didn't get to play the sports I wanted to play, but I did grow up playing sports, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned you lost your sight at age 11. That must have been pretty devastating for you and your family.
Yeah, it was because it was a random illness that was very sudden, and it changed everything. Obviously, like for my family, it's hard because as a parent, I almost died, right? And I was either supposed to be dead or severely brain damaged, and luckily, all I came out with was not being able to see. But because I know you're a mom, any
Mm.
parent that watches their kids suffer is horrible. But then when watches them like suffer and struggle, kind of which is perceived as unnecessarily, that's even more difficult. On top of the fact, like my parents know what I'm like, and so they know I'm going to put myself in situations that are going to be difficult just by my personality. And to have the courage to allow their son to go off and do some of the things that I did by myself, yeah, I have to commend them for that because it could not have been easy, especially with typical parental nature of like wanting to protect your kid, make sure something bad doesn't happen. And so like I will commend them for that. And it was very, but I was also extremely lucky because my family was very supportive, and both my parents did a really great job of fulfilling different roles and needed. Like my mom was always there to listen to what I was going through and to cry and all that kind of stuff. And my dad was there to he started me on the path of like lifting weights right after I got out of the hospital because that's what he was doing that with a friend of his who was an ex-Canadian football player. And that was like my physical rehab, and that was my like connection to the sports and to guys, and that whole like kind of locker room feel. And so they really kind of fulfilled two different needs that I needed at the time. And then for me, a lot of this is looking back. I didn't realize how much of my identity I had like was truly wrapped up in being that NFL quarterback. And when I wasn't able to even attempt that, I was really kind of lost, even though I went on and like I accomplished all the things that you're supposed to accomplish, like from a educational standpoint, right? Like I have a master's in counseling psych, I have a law degree, I'm a member of the Texas bar, all these like checkbox things that made me look like I was super, super successful. But I was really kind of lost because I was just going through the motions, doing what I knew I needed to do to make sure I was employable if I ever wanted to have a job. And it really took me going through the journey of what I'm doing, as a coach to really look and realize, I still see myself as that NFL quarterback. It just went from like all the physical skills of how far can you throw a ball, how pretty is your spiral, how accurate is it, to the soft skills, leader of in that example, men, uniting people behind a vision, motivating, inspire. I'm still doing all the things that a quarterback does. I'm just playing a different game. And once I realized that and stepped into that, it's kind of like two halves of me came together. And it was a really, it was necessary for me to go on and, I guess, feel complete in some ways.
Amazing. And it's well, I'm a great believer in life, source, universe, and we're sent all these things to deal with, and it's almost like somebody somewhere has got a plan for us. And there's a saying that we never get sent things that we can't deal with, and clearly that's the case for you and your competitive nature, and the same with me. I've had 4 different cancers. I should have been dead by now as well. I should have been, had I not I had stage 4 cancer in 2015 and told that I had less than a year to live unless I did certain things that the medical profession wanted me to do, which of course I didn't, because I'm me and I do my own thing. Nobody tells me where I'm going to die and where I'm going to go. I sort myself out. Thank you very much. So you mentioned you've got all these qualifications, legal qualifications, and did you say that you've got a psychic qualification as well in there?
I have a master's in counseling psychology. And a law degree.
Wonderful. So
I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, so I kept going to school.
Right. Yeah. I think we're still in school though, aren't we? Every day is a school day. The time I say that, every single day is a school day. So you did these qualifications. Have you actually been a lawyer or a psychologist or whatever?
I did. I never really did the psychology thing. I knew I didn't want to do it, so I never went on and got the actual certification required to be a what's called here at LPCI. But I did. So I went to law school and I did practice law for about a year or more. I did the one thing I didn't want to do when I was in law school, which was contract law. That's what I got a job in. And that's just too much details. Anyway. And I was in-house counsel for an engineering firm, and they stuck me with all the accountants. I don't know how many accountants you've been around. They are not very happy people. and I noticed it was really affecting who I was. I'm a very positive person by nature, very, like solution oriented, and things are going to work out and they're better. And they're the opposite. And it was really, and I was like, I cannot be working in this environment. And in some ways, I think in order to be a good lawyer, you kind of have to be that way. It's you're worried about, who's screwing who over and what might go wrong. And, like checking out, it wasn't who I wanted to be. And so that's when I, stepped out, and I actually started with rehabbing houses, fixing flips. And then along that journey, my competitiveness kicked in, and I was like, I want to get great at this. So I started listening to podcasts and reading books about business. And then that kind of went to personal development. And then that's kind of how I got to what I do now.
Cool. That goes back also to the personality typing, because accountants are introverted, whereas you and I are extroverted. I've profiled hundreds and hundreds, probably in the thousands now, of accountants and lawyers over the years. And every single time the leaders are a totally different profile to the people who do the work. And that's, I don't think that's any coincidence.
I don't think it's an accident. No,
absolutely not. So the leaders, I when I used to do these profile assessments for teams in person, we'd be all sitting around the table at lunchtime, and then I'd be going through what profiling is and everybody's individual profile. And I was able, as a facilitator, to get things out on the table that there is no way that I would hire the boss to do my accounts. I probably wouldn't hire them to even, go shopping, because their level of detail is not good enough for the work. But the people who do the work, but then of course that brings stresses and strains, because you've got the extrovert people who are fast-paced, optimistic, can conquer the world, working and mostly managing people who are completely opposite, as you've described. So the communication difficulties, the pace of work difficulties, it's stress all round, which is why I'm now concentrating on helping lawyers and accountants. And I have been chief executive of a law firm, and I ran a big consulting division for EY with over 200 staff. So I know what it's like within accounting firms and law firms, how much the stress is there. And it's every day of the week. It's not just, filing deadlines. It's, case deadlines, client problems and so on. And you've got people who are accountants and lawyers trying to deal with the clients, but they're not communicators, so it's a complicated, it can be a complicated setup. But when you know what the profiles are, so do you use MBTI in your work, Ryan?
I don't, and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, some ways I kind of should. It's funny because when you were talking about they don't communicate well, like that, like it's kind of the name of the game for what you and I do. But when you're like really, I think like people who get in specialized fields like lawyers and accountants, they use a lot of jargon because that's what they do when they talk to their peers. And they forget that not most people don't know that jargon, and they just need to communicate differently to their clients, which makes the whole process much easier. And where this is going is when you were talking about the different profiles, it's really nice because it organizes that information in your brain to where you can
Mm.
communicate a topic, an idea in a much more understandable, relatable way to your client. So it's probably something that I should do. I just haven't done. Mostly because with my clients, my gift isn't so much letting them know who they are as far as what you're talking about. It's more like I've discovered I'm super creative and I connect dots other people don't see, which is a lot of what I do in my business consulting, which is a lot of, just strategy, problem, or not, like problem identification, solutions. And they ends up being the same way with my, as far as the individual clients as well, because it's just connecting those maybe limiting beliefs or, just reframing a belief to help them go on and do that makes so I kind of end up doing things from that perspective more than I do the personality perspectives. But I'm looking at what you're doing, and my brain came up with like 15 different things I could do with it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's something I should, look into.
Cool. Well, I'm doing some training shortly in January. I'm starting a new academy. I'm starting a
Okay.
foundation training plus an academy, which literally I'm putting together as we speak now.
As we
I've got
yeah.
somebody working on it. So
Yeah.
so there we go. I'll let you know about that. But it's
Yeah.
what you were saying basically is that you work on intuition, and because
Yeah.
you don't have the gift of sight, I find I speak sign language, and I find when I was learning sign language many 30 odd years ago, people who don't have some function, all the others are heightened. So the intuition, in your case, you can sit back and see intuitively what the challenges are, and you can, because you've got balls, you can state the obvious. And
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
people don't.
A lot of them don't do it.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't. And I say to people, have you thought about so and so? Or why are you doing this? Oh, well, we've always done it. Well, have you thought about doing it? Oh, I don't know. Oh, I'm not sure about
Yeah, I
that.
know it confounds me. Like,
Mm.
so we know you're supposed to come up with a mission statement, right? Like, the one of the things you're always taught in coaching. And I thought for years about it, and I could not, for the life of me, come up with a mission statement that I thought really summed it up. And I was, doing something one day, not even related to a mission statement, and it just like, download hit me, right? And my mission is to lead, inspire, and challenge the status quo. And
Yeah,
it's that last part that you're tapping into, right? That challenging the status quo. That it's something that I've done since I was a little kid. My favorite question in the world is why. I believe
yeah,
everybody should know the answer to that question, depending on the topic.
yeah,
And it drives people who aren't white people nuts, right? Because what do you mean why? It's always worked that way. Why does it work that way?
yeah,
Why can't we make it better? I mean, how do you know? To me, it's a fascinating question.
yeah,
And so, yeah, that challenge in the status quo is something you and I have in common. Because you're
yeah,
right. I mean, it's because it's always worked doesn't mean it can't be better. Doesn't mean that it's not the best way.
yeah.
But how do you know that unless you examine it?
Exactly. Yeah, and that got me into big trouble at school. And this is why
Oh yeah.
when I got trained over 25 years ago in disc profiling, I I then understood why I was such a challenge at school, because I was always asking why, and I was never
Yeah.
accepting the reason.
Yep.
And I keep going, why, till I was happy that I understood the
Mm-hmm.
why. And most of the
Yep.
time that meant going around the houses, and people don't like being challenged, do they?
No.
So,
No.
and they think they're being challenged, but actually asking the question why isn't challenging. It's a question, but it's how people
I'm so
perceive
glad
it.
you said that. Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like I did not realize I was probably in my 30s before I realized that was really a challenging question to most people. Because to me, I'm asking it because I'm curious.
Yeah,
You know, and like, so to me like, a lot of times just curiosity. I mean, sometimes it can be challenging, but a lot of times just curiosity. But that's not how people were taking it. They were taking it as like, you're challenging their beliefs, you're challenging their thoughts, which, when you really look at it, you are. But here's my thought: if you know, like, the why behind what you believe, it should never be a challenge. You're just
yeah,
explaining, right? It's only a challenge if your house is built on a weak foundation, which most people's is.
brilliant. You've just inspired me for my next LinkedIn newsletter. I
Oh,
never know
good.
I never know what to write, and then suddenly something
Yeah.
pops up, and I go, right, that's it. Okay,
I
so
did the same thing.
and then write
Yeah,
all about that. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. I wrote an article about the importance of play because of watching my 2.5-year-old nephew over Christmas. I wrote it like Monday,
Yeah,
so I did the same thing.
yeah, brilliant. I can't sit down and My PA's put in my diary writing time, but
I
when
can't
it's
do it
right,
either.
I can't do it. I just write when it happens,
It hits me. Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
sometimes,
that's the creative in us, right? We're either
yeah,
inspired or we're not. And I've discovered, like, if I'm not feeling it, it's just not worth the effort because it's going to be shit,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I'm going to I'm going to waste more time writing shit than when I'm inspired. I wrote because I have an opportunity to be introduced to some like really really powerful people in the sports arena, and the person who was doing it, like when we write something, the first thing I wrote was like crap, and then I looked at it. So the night that I rewrote the second one, which I think is really really good actually, I thought about it. I talked to her, thought about it, went to dinner with my cousin, came back. It's like this like 9:30 at night. I was like, oh shit, I should write this. Wrote it in like 30 minutes, like revised it the next day, and it's probably one of the best things that I've ever written about myself. Because I just don't write well when it comes to myself. But what it did was I kind of looked at it from a different perspective than I normally write about myself, and it just flowed, right? But
yeah,
if I had like had that scheduled out to do, I would have sat there for an hour and a half going, "What do I write?
yeah.
What do I write?" Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm there with you.
Exactly. So given the fact that you don't have the gift of sight, how do you do your writing? How do you manage with all the tech?
Yeah. So when I was in law school, the iPhone 3S came out, and it was the first iPhone that came out with a program called VoiceOver, which changes the way you run it. So like when I touch the screen, it reads what I touch, and then in order to activate it, I double tap. And so that was the first phone ever that I could like, you know, enter my own phone contacts. I could text message. I could, email from, I could, check the internet. So like it opened up the entire world to me. And so, and before that, I was using, a laptop with a speech program called JAWS. And literally, I do my entire business on my phone, whether it's my blog posts, whether it's my emails, obviously client calls, Zooms. I just do everything on my phone because it works, it's stable, it's easier, and it's accessible. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. So anybody listening to this who feels inspired to contact you, how do people get hold of you, Ryon?
Yeah, the easiest way, my website has all my stuff, which is, Ryon, R-Y-O, sorry, I can spell this, Ryon, R-Y-O-N, Esquire.com. And then my email is ryon@ryonesquire.com.
Brilliant.
And I'm at Ryon Esquire, like, LinkedIn and, Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of good stuff too.
Cool, excellent. So top tip for anybody who's feeling a bit off at the moment, and they're not at the top of their game. They've had a few days off work in the break that we're currently in, and they're dreading going back to work. How can they kind of get themselves revved up again?
Oh, that's a tough question. Because I tend to be a little more, kind of gritty about some of that kind of stuff. Like, I guess a lot of it is just, be appreciative for the break that you had in the first place. Be grateful that you get to spend time with family, friends, or, just downtime. And then, to me, it's find something to be excited about. It may not be work, but as far as like what you do, it maybe it's like, how can I use what I do to grow as a person, right? Or how can I use what I do as a platform to go on to something bigger and better in life, right? Or maybe it's just this sucks. This is when I do. This is not who I am, and maybe it's just figuring that out, and then really sitting with yourself, sitting with some silence. That's a big one. Turn off all the communication, quit watching TV, get away from the noise, listen to the science, listen to yourself, and figure out what you really want to do, and then get excited about, and maybe you have to change a job and go do that. Like there's this it's a tough question because everybody's so different as far as like why they're not feeling jazzed. But to me, a lot of it is just it's not. I'm not sure that you do what you love. I think you love what you're good at, and so maybe it's either find what you're good at or focus on getting good at something. And I think that makes you kind of love what you do a lot more. Everybody wants to do something they're good at or great at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that fits exactly with what I say to people. What would you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What would you do for
Yeah.
free for the rest of your life? What makes your heart sing? And
Yep.
quite often nobody's ever asked somebody that question. So they struggle. But when you enjoy what you do, you never do a day's work in your life, do you? Because
Right.
it's
Right.
like having fun, it's playing all the time.
It is. Yeah, I love being creative and solving problems. I really do. It's a game. I don't enjoy executing them, but like doing the day in day out drudgery work of like bringing it to life necessarily. But I really love like ideating in the energy of creation.
Yeah.
Like that to me is like just fun, which is exactly why I do what I do, right? I really love working with people, inspiring them to go and like try big, huge, hairy, audacious goals that they wouldn't have done otherwise. Like that to me is fun because I'm changing the world either one person at a time or one organization at a time. That's fun. The actual making sure that they do this stuff, that's where the work starts.
Brilliant. Absolutely, man after my own heart. On the
Yeah.
just before we finish, what's your view on how do I say this? That somebody's going to be upset somewhere along the line, but men don't seem to be men anymore,
Yeah.
so
That's an interesting question.
it
Yeah.
seems to be like everybody's gone soft.
Hmm.
Do you have a view on that?
I do. I have a question for you before I answer that, though. Do you ask that to a lot of your male guests, or is it something specifically about me that made you decide to ask that question? I'm curious.
Um, you're clearly a man's man, what I'd call a
Yeah.
man's man, a proper man, and
Hmm.
I don't come
I
across
appreciate
many.
that, by the
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
yeah, I don't come across many these days, and so often we can't say what we mean and mean what we say and all the rest of it. We can't open our mouth
Hmm.
without upsetting some. I had to look up recently woke this
Yeah.
woke
Well,
thing.
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought, what the
Uh-huh.
heck is woke?
Yeah.
Um, and it's basically, to me, everybody's gone soft. Women have gone soft,
Yeah.
men have got soft.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. There are people who are narcissists and just not nice people. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I think things have gone a bit too far. And this business about where it leads goes back into the leadership thing. My
Yeah.
daughter, who's head of HR for a big company, she said to me years ago, "Mum, if you were still running your big team, we'd have to sack you because the words you come out with, the way you
Yep.
speak, it's not allowed these days. So it's a good job that I'm not, running a corporation or a big team
Yeah.
anymore."
That's interesting. So I'll tell you a funny story, then I'll give you my answer. When I was in law school, because like I said, I'm from a very small town originally, which I do think plays into a lot of probably the manliness that you see. Blue collar community. They all work hard. That's for a lot of what you see as far as who I am. But because a lot of the men that I'm around are still pretty manly. But then you get to the city, and you're right, it's a very different story. I remember being in law school, and someone says, I don't even remember what someone said, and my response was, "Dude, that's gay." And I and this is typical, law student and lawyer. The person wasn't even gay, but they get offended by it because what lawyers do. They defend those who can't defend themselves. But it was a really good lesson at the time because it was something that it really could have been offensive to somebody. It could have hurt somebody. It was an unnecessary thing to truly say. And I've never said that other than telling the story since, right? So, I'm it's this way. The point I'm making is like, as far as that is, you know, there are things that are offensive to certain people, and in my opinion, that should be respected if it's something that is truly an unnecessary thing to say. Like that. Other than, I mean, like the reason that dude that's gay meant what it meant was because at some point in time in the history of that phrasing, that was derogatory, and so I understood, respect that, and quit it. Back to your point, as far as like, yes, I do think I'm a huge believer that both genders have their gifts that are gender specific. That doesn't make one gender better than the other. That just means, like anybody, they just have gifts that the other one does. And that should be embraced, celebrated, and loved for what it is. And as a result, that, allows me to, embrace the parts of me that make me manly, and then embrace and love the parts of things that make women feminine, right? And the reality is, like that's kind of from like just a relationship perspective. Even if you look at it from a business perspective, like both genders have points of view that are incredibly important to coming up with either solutions or products or offering that serve everyone. Like, the hubris of men not to listen to women's opinions when they're 50% of the population and probably influence 80% of the purchases is stupid, right? Like but and so it's one of those like I I guess it's like I come from a standpoint of like everyone should be respected for who
Mhm.
they are. They should be respected for the gifts they have up until the point that they do something that removes that to me is removes that respect, right? And then you have a different story. So I'm really doing a horrible job answering this question. you know,
They don't know.
because it's a weird question, but like, but I love it because I do think I really do think it is both genders are getting weaker, and I'm a huge believer in like strength of mind, obviously strength of mind, strength of character, and just because someone's different than you doesn't it shouldn't challenge your beliefs, if that makes sense, right? And
Yeah.
even if your beliefs are challenged, it shouldn't crumble your foundation. That's more of a you problem than it is the other person problem, right? Now, people don't get me wrong. There is absolutely, racism, systematic stereotypes. Like there are absolutely horrible actors out there, but we have gone too far the other way because, you know, we evolved with both genders. We evolved with polarity. Why don't we double down with what we're good at versus trying
Exactly.
to fight our natures?
Yeah,
If that
exactly.
makes sense. Yeah.
When you was telling your story, the line cracked up. So I don't know what it was that you said. But when you said that you've never said that phrase again, apart from telling the
Oh,
story.
the phrase was "dude, that's gay." When I was in law school, that was I don't know if you heard that whole story, but yeah, the phrase was "dude, that's gay," and I've never said that other than telling
Do
my
do
story.
this do this gig.
Dude, that's gay.
Dude, that's gay. Right.
Yeah, like
Not heard
like I
that.
said that. Yeah, and like I said, I've never said that other. It was a good lesson. I mean, because if you look at the phrasing of that, like that at one point in time was meant to be derogatory, and I wasn't using it that way intentionally, but I wouldn't have been using it that way if it didn't mean what it meant, right? So it was a really good lesson to learn, but so I don't use it, but that also doesn't mean that I'm going to, you know, at some point in time we're all going to offend somebody because people are super sensitive right now. So I don't worry. I try not to be offensive, but I also don't worry about when it does happen because it's not always my fault. But that
Yeah,
doesn't mean I don't
yeah,
try to learn in case there is a lesson there. Because sometimes
yeah.
there is a lesson there, like in my example. And then sometimes some people are just too damn sensitive and they just need to grow up and like, get thicker skin. I mean, I'm going to catch flack for that. But, if people aren't strong, how do we survive as a species?
Yeah, well, we survive together in communities, so the weaker
Absolutely.
can help support the strong, and the strong can help
But
support
we
the weak.
survive in strong communities. We don't survive
Yeah,
in weak communities.
yeah, exactly.
You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? And I don't mean that from a masculine standpoint. Like, I mean, some of the strongest people I know are women. Female strength is incredible, and it's very different than male strength. You
mm,
know, like like standing back and watching someone like your husband go off to war. There's a hell of a lot of strength in that, right? Like sacrificing like your job, your love, like for your children, like that's a term. Like there's so much strength. It's just not viewed as strength by men, unfortunately. But I mean, women are like in many ways way stronger than men because to me, a lot of the stuff that they're strong about are things that they are enduring that they don't have the control sometimes to change or fix.
mm,
And that feeling of helplessness to me would be a horrible way to live life. But like women find the power to endure that and have historically. And that to me is like incredibly powerful and so much strength that, most men would never have.
mm. It also plays to the conversation about the personality styles, because there's so many the introverted personality styles and the extroverted personality styles have
Mm-hmm.
different strengths. So it's not just the man woman thing, it's the
Absolutely.
extrovert
Mm-hmm.
introvert thing, it's the
Yep.
experience, it's the maturity, the age, stuff
Yep.
that you've been through, and so on and so forth. There's a lot to it, isn't there? And we could talk forever about this, I'm
Oh,
sure.
you absolutely could. Yeah. Yeah. And that to me, like, I think that's why you and I see that. I think that's part of our leadership, which is like bringing out the strengths of all of our teammates, right? And helping them to be the best versions of themselves. Like that right there is a total definition of servant leader that I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in leadership roles don't realize. Like they think if someone else gets praise, that diminishes them. No, 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 no. You know, like it doesn't diminish them. It doesn't diminish the person who's not getting the praise. You know, it obviously elevates the person who is getting the praise. But if you're the person that helped them, you know, or allowed them, or whatever, like that's all kinds of like, you know, props for your leadership. So it's just a different way of viewing stuff, and I think it's probably because I come from a very selfless place of it. Like, you know, I trust me, I'm all about, you know, being known for being great, but you know, I'm not going to do it at the expense of somebody else. And just because someone else is great doesn't mean I can't be great too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're all in my book. It's very simple. You're either nice or you're not. I don't care what color you've come, you know, what color you are, what
I agree.
nationality, what which way you swing or whatever, male, female.
Yep.
It just I'm not interested. You're nice or you're not. Simple as that. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
On that note, it's been lovely speaking with you, Ryon. So Ryon, that's Ryon Esquire.com. Anybody wants to get hold of you. Thank you so much, Ryon. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.